Good morning. Welcome to the BmoreNews Morning Show. My name's Donnie Glover, publisher of BmoreNews.com, and we're with the one and only Marcia Jews. Good morning, Marcia.
Good morning, Donnie. Good morning, Baltimore. I'm so grateful for us to all be standing and sitting here today. This has been
Marcia,
a weird time.
They've got a list of people who were at the Capitol, and it's all up online. Did I see your face in there?
Boy, you know I went over there messing with those fools. I saw enough of them in Indiana, and South Bend, and New Orleans, and Conroe, Texas. Thank you, no thank you. No, those are some dangerous people who were there on a mission. But that we won't deal with that, all that foolishness.
Okay, but before we get to Senator Antonio Hayes from the 40th State Legislative District here in Maryland, you wanted to make an announcement.
Of course, as you can see, my BEA sign here, the Black Engineer of the Year Awards Conference is coming up February the 11th through the 13th. We're very excited. You can go up on bea.org and register. They have the HBCU homecoming event, which is going to be a lot of fun with people from all over the country, the HBCU Village, and the K-12 Village. And so the K through 12 is really introducing young people to STEM and the people who have really excelled in science, technology, engineering, and math. And the reality is that that's where we're going. Career Communications Group, under the leadership of Dr. Tyrone Taborn, has been doing this conference and publishing 3 publications: the Black Engineer and Information Technology Magazine, Hispanic Engineer and Information Technology Magazine, as well as the Women of Color in STEM magazine. And so he's been doing this for 35 years, and he's headquartered here in Baltimore. And while he went away to several other cities, he's coming back to Baltimore in the next couple of years. But in the meantime, we can see everything there is to see virtually on www.ccgmag.com or beya.org.
Good deal. Marcia, we're very proud. And you've been working with Dr. Taborn for all those 35 years?
Yeah, not all 35, but it's been 20 some odd years. I was their president and chief operating officer and associate publisher when I was here before I moved to New York in '99. But I've come back every year, and I'm either interviewing or doing something, because it's so important to see so many people of color who have won these amazing awards, from folks who are astronauts to fighter pilots to people who have created. Mark Dean created the PC with IBM, and it goes on. I mean, we were talking not too long ago. There are thousands of people who have won these awards. And let me just say this, because I know it personally. Those programs where you have to go through the award process and you have a whole team of people who are actually reading every one of those packages, they're really serious about that selection process. It's not a joke. And you have some of the greatest minds from around the world who are looking at those packages, having in-depth conversations about those packages. So if you won an award with the Black Engineer of the Year, you literally won that award, and you had to compete against some of the greatest minds in this nation. And so I can validate that because I saw it for 6 years. This is just a wonderful program. And if we're looking at the future is in STEM, then we need to make certain that we have our young people involved in it at an early age so it becomes part of their DNA.
Marcia, one other word. At these events, and you said for years they had been here in Baltimore at the Baltimore Convention Center, and then somewhere along the line, the city of, the Dr. Taborn decided to move it elsewhere. But in that time, you've brought to Baltimore generals, admirals, all kinds of military higher up.
There's a program within BEA that is called the Stars and Stripes. And there are 1 to 4 star generals. They are in technology. They're in leadership. I mean, so when we look at Lloyd Austin, I know General Austin from the Stars and Stripes. We have active and retired military personnel who have created this, and they bring in
And
our.
Marcia, for those who don't know, Lloyd Austin, you want to bring people up to
General
speed?
Lloyd Austin has been nominated to be the Secretary of Defense, and under Vice President or President-elect Biden. And so we're very excited. I mean, if you're going to have somebody over the Department of Defense, you should certainly have somebody who understands how to deal with these campaigns. But he's also a very human person. So sometimes you see some of these stellar people, and I've been working off and on for 40 years with military personnel. And these people are straight up, no chaser. They're kind, they're gentle, but they're no nonsense, and they love their country, and they fought for their country, and they're doing everything to empower the people of this nation. And so,
Marcia, that's a great segue to the Senator Hayes. I mean, when you think of the developments last week in this country, I mean, where do we start? First of all, what are your thoughts on patriotism? I thought we were patriotic, when we were kids. I pledge allegiance to the flag. What did we see last week?
I was taken aback by it, Donnie. It was not symptomatic of so many people that I see that love and care about our country and go on and do the right thing. It was a tragedy to see so many folks be brainwashed and succumb to violence at the center point of our nation's seat of government. And so I was disappointed. I was frustrated. I at points. I even went through the emotions of being angry to see such destruction in our country. I think moving forward, and hopefully with the transition of a new president in Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, that we will begin at least a transition of healing process where people respect other people's differences and recognize them for what they are and begin to work together. But we have a lot of work to do.
It also brings to mind about this time last year, we were talking about Harford County Delegate Marianne Lasante and her reference to Prince George County as the N-word district. When we see the Trumpsters on television climbing the wall, but then you think here in the state of Maryland, we may not have people climbing the wall. But when Delegate Marianne Lasante says something about the N-word district, have we really come that far here in the state of Maryland?
I think we have. I think we've made great progresses in our communities and communities throughout Maryland and in Baltimore City. There will always remain among us, and we will be naive to think that there aren't those among us that share a different view. They have not grown in their maturity as far as understanding and diversity and equity. And so it's incumbent upon all of us to continue to add a voice to those issues and hold them accountable for their actions. I think we've made a lot of progress in having people in the right spaces and places to make some of the decisions that need to be made in order to move us forward. And even now, you see those who participated and urged on those who participated in last week's event, they're being demonized. They're being, people aren't as willing as many of the leaders in the Congress were cheering these folks on or urging them on. A lot of them have backtracked it and retreated in their statements. And so, yes, there's progress, but we still have a lot of work to do.
Okay, and I'll just ask one more question and pass the ball. What are your hopes, plans? What's your vision for this upcoming Maryland General Assembly? And it starts this week.
Absolutely. And so this session is going to be like no other. It's going to, with the pandemic still looming upon us, there's going to be a lot of structural changes this legislative session. The Maryland Senate and the Maryland House of Delegates will both convene on January the 13th, this upcoming Wednesday at 12 noon. We will vote on the officers and the leadership of both chambers. The House of Delegates will adjourn or recess until the month of February. The Senate will continue with floor actions on Tuesdays and Fridays of each week, and all of our committee hearings will be virtual. However, all of our committee votes will actually take place in the committee room. I think, this historic time that the pandemic has put us in has provided us a unique opportunity to give more people access to the workings of Annapolis, as everything will be live streamed. Testimony is encouraged to be submitted either in video or in writing. And so there's going to be a lot of eyes on this upcoming legislative session as we deal with some really, really tough issues around reforming our criminal justice system. How do we respond appropriately to many Marylanders and businesses that are hurting from the economic implications of this pandemic? There's going to be a lot of focus on, how do we not only address some of the systematic racism that's happened in the criminal justice system as it relates to African Americans, but how do we provide other opportunities to economically empower those African Americans? How do we look at home ownership and small business opportunities to encourage wealth in African American communities, which I believe is one of the most effective ways of dealing with crime and violence in our neighborhood? If we deal with the economics and give people an opportunity to be successful and productive citizens at the table, I think that will make a change. But this session is going to be historic, unlike no other. I feel like session started about 3 weeks ago. I haven't had a break since the interim, and sharing with my colleagues, many of them have been working throughout, as many of us have served on different work committees and studies and things of that nature. But there's going to be a lot to look for, and I would encourage the general public to go to the Maryland General Assembly website. This is the second year of the new design of the website. Is a lot more user friendly. Everything is all of the committee schedules are already posted. Those bills that have been pre-filed, we had more than 300 bills pre-filed already in the Maryland Senate before the Senate even started. And so you go to the website and you can look up the details of those bills there online.
At 300 out of 2,500?
300 in the Senate. I hear there's even more in the House. There's only 47 members of the Senate, 141 members of the House. I hear there's thousands of bills that's been introduced on the House, and even more going to be introduced come session start. So in order to pre-file a bill, you had to get it in by November, right? And so those people who had their bill completed and drafted by November, those are the bills that you see on the website. But at the start of session on Wednesday, you'll see hundreds, if not thousands, of more bills pile in.
Okay, Umar, Neil, Marcia, any questions?
Yeah, I was just wondering how, when you go through this process, it's broken out then by committee. Yes. What actually happens with that bill? So the bill comes in, it's presented to the full body or to a committee, and then the whole body votes for it, or the committee votes which ones are going to go in. I don't know the process. It might be interesting for our listeners and viewers to get a sense of how that a bill is just a bill. What happens with that? That used to be, and they don't do that anymore.
I'm just a bill.
Schoolhouse Rock, right?
I'm old enough to remember that, Marcia.
I know, I can't help it.
No, absolutely. And so one of the things, the way the legislature is structured, you really have an expertise in the committee assignment in which you are appointed to. Each committee, each member is assigned to one standing committee. And then there are special committees, which you may have members appointed to as well. And so I serve on a Senate Finance Committee. There's two committees in the Senate that sound like they deal with money: Senate Finance and Budget and Tax. The difference between the two is Budget and Tax deals with public money. So they deal with the state budget, they deal with state agencies. The Finance Committee, we deal with everything in the private sector. And so we set regulations for the banking industry, to the health community, to utilities and other things. So anything that have an impact on a private industry, we set policy for that. And there's you also have the JPR committee, which hear everything as it relates to criminal justice and social justice issues, as well as they do a little bit of estates and trust. And then last but not least, you have EHE, Education, Health, and Environment, that deal with education, health, and environment issues. Some of the special committees are executive appointments, whereby That committee, made up of various members from all of the committees, decide on who the governor appointments are. Every year, the governor will submit certain names to be appointed to various boards and commissions. And that committee actually in the Senate has to confirm those bills. And so every bill that's introduced in the legislature has to come to the full body 3 times. And some of them don't make it to the 3rd level. Some of them don't make it to the 2nd level. So at any bill that any legislative proposal that one has will come and be introduced on the floor of the Senate or the floor in the House, is then assigned to a committee. The committees will then have a hearing on that bill where they solicit public testimony and so forth, and they'll deliberate and they'll debate the bill. Those bills that are successful in committee will be voted out of the committee onto second reader. So that's the 2nd time that it will hit the floor. Some bills don't make it to second reader, so they die in committee or they don't have any action beyond being heard. And then if it's successful on second reader, the difference between the House and the Senate, I served 4 years in the House, and this is my 2nd year in the Senate. In the House, whatever bills that make it out of committee on second reader is just assumed that it is the will of the committee, and so therefore there's very little debate. I was in for a rude awakening when I came to the Senate, because every time a bill is on the floor of the Senate, there's always a debate. You can have a bill that successfully passed the committee with a unanimous vote, and then it gets the second reader, and there's a debate that ensues, and then it dies. But if it make it past second reader is also the opportunity, if you have any amendments to the bill, to also make your amendments or debate whatever amendments that time. And then you have third reader. Once a bill comes to the floor for third reader for final passage, the entire body has an opportunity to vote on that bill. And at that time, if it's successful, it will then move over to the other chamber. So if it originated in the Senate, it'll go over to the House. If it originated in the House, it'll go over to the Senate. And it must pass both committees identically in order for it to land on the governor's desk. And so we typically hear anywhere from 3,500 to 4,500 bills in a 90-day session. Not all of them make it back to the floor, but every single bill that's introduced, especially make it to the floor, at least to be read on the first time.
Does the governor have to sign it?
No, the governor don't have to sign it. And one of the first orders of business that will be taken up this session is overriding several of the governor's vetoes. I had a piece of legislation mandating that the state of Maryland provide additional support as it relates to crime here in Baltimore City, having state police take control over some of the highways and byways and keep them out of the city limits, because I believe that, state police are really good at traffic control and enforcing, interstate trafficking. But, getting someone from Harford County or Carroll County inside a dark alley in the city is not good or safe for the officer, nor is it safe for some of the residents that will be there. In addition, we created about 10 positions with people with lived experience to work in their own communities. The governor felt that he didn't want the legislature telling them what to do. And he wrote a response to us because we didn't pass some of his pieces of legislation that are related to public safety, that he didn't feel that he wanted to pass something that we would pass. And so when that happens, if he vetoes the bill once we have concluded, we have to wait till the next legislative session to override his veto. And so this upcoming session will override the PROTECT legislation that I introduced. We're looking to override the Kerwin legislation that was introduced, as well as the HBCU bill that the governor vetoed in the last session. And so there's several pieces of legislation that we as a legislature thought was very important to Marylanders that the governor, for whatever reason or another, decided to veto. And so it takes at least 2/3 of the Senate and 2/3 of the House in order to override any governor's veto. But I believe because some of these pieces of legislation pass with an overwhelming majority and sometimes even unanimous vote of both the House and the Senate, and the governor vetoed, that we'll be successfully at overriding his veto.
So, Senator.
Yes.
So in business, when we want to create something, we have a vision that might be 5 years, 10 years out. This is where we want to be. Mm-hmm. And then every decision gets kind of focused around that. So when you have so many senators and congresspeople that are trying to tackle the day-to-day, do you guys have a common vision of where you want Maryland to be 5 years out? Is there such a vision, and how do you guys come up with it?
For the
Or
most
put
part,
differently, do the state legislators convene with the federal legislators on a broad vision? Is that
Actually, let's just keep it in the state for now.
well?
Like both houses.
You mentioned the feds. He's on the state level. That's
Yeah,
why
I'm talking about the state. So I got confused there. At a state level, how do we have a common vision of where we want to be? Because it's so easy to get bogged down in the minutia of different laws and different agendas.
absolutely. And so a lot of times people look at budgets as just a funding source, right? But one of the things that I learned in Political 101, where you spend your money defines your greatest priorities. And so the budget that is passed every year by the legislature is one of the single most important pieces of policy legislation that the state of Maryland passed. And so in that process, you have both the operating budget and the capital budget. The capital budget is usually the capital budget deals with brick and mortar. So that's capital investment, actually building of buildings. That budget is has a 5-year outlook, right? And the operating budget, similarly, we do have a minimum amount of things that we need to pay for. Our operating budget typically pays for staff and other things, and then it also goes to support whatever policy issues that the state of Maryland would have. And so both of those documents are always a good place to look to identify where the priorities of the state rest, and to and follow that vision along.
Senator, this is Neil. I actually have a quick statement, and then I have a question. I want to circle back to something you said at the beginning about what was going on in D.C. and the anger at what we saw on Wednesday. And I think all of us share that anger. But for me, one of the things that I think gets a little bit lost in this is there's so much focus on the storming of the Capitol, as awful and outrageous as that was. And as we get sort of further removed, I'm realizing that a lot of my anger isn't directed at that incident, although it's certainly worthy of it. It's what happened inside the Capitol with the actual legislators themselves, where a majority of Republicans in Congress voted to undo the certified election results in 6 states for the purpose of undoing an election. And I think that I don't want that is worthy of anger. And I don't want that to get lost in the shuffle of what happened with people storming the Capitol. That is an outrageous abuse of their power. And so that's my statement. And then the question that goes along with that, to you as a legislator, even on the state level, you obviously are working in an environment where you have to work with people on the other side to try and come up with compromise and keep lines of communication open. How would you, if you served in Congress, or even if you have Republican colleagues who may have supported those efforts, how do you go back to the table with people who literally tried to undo the results of an election and work with them in good faith to find compromise in the same way you might have been able to do before? How do you do that?
Neil, I'll tell you, I agree with your comments. I think part of it, for me, what elevates and comes to mind is really the destruction, and knowing how the legislative process works. A lot of what the Republicans was doing was actually theater. They knew going into that, before they went onto the floor, they had no chance of overriding that. They often it frustrates citizens to see the theatrics play out and to waste time in that way with something that has been so endeared to them, and having a confidence of the people that they represent. And so how do I do it? All the time. And I will tell you, the Maryland legislature, in my experience, both serving in the House and the Senate of the Maryland legislature, is not as confrontational or polarizing as what we have experienced in Washington, D.C. One of the great things about the Maryland legislature, and then it's also what we get in criticism sometimes, is it's truly a citizen legislature. We really buckle down for the 90 days that we're in session. That doesn't bar us from working in our districts, which I often do, the 9 months that we're not in session. But we are working full-time jobs. We're spending time with our families and our communities, and really getting to know the districts that we care about. And so at the end of the day, I think, all Marylanders, whether you're Democrat, Republican, Independent, so on and so forth. We all want to see Maryland be great, and I think you approach it with the spirit of, how one of the problems is a lot of contention come about how do we move Maryland to the next level? How do we make sure that all boats rise, as opposed to a small few of them? And so I work well across the aisle with all of my constituents all the time. John, it looked like you're anxiously wanting to jump in.
He's trying to come through the wood. He's trying to come through the camera.
You said, and I'm wondering, is this a value judgment? You said what all Marylanders want. I don't know what other Marylanders want. When I look at the city of Baltimore and I see the white L and the black butterfly, investment goes into the white L, but the black butterfly is empty.
What's that?
And so I don't know what they want.
Mr. Jews, did you want to say something?
I wanted him to explain the white L and the black butterfly.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, so the white L goes essentially from Johns Hopkins University down to the Inner Harbor, east over to Canton. That's the white L. And then the black butterfly is East Baltimore and West Baltimore. So what we've seen, for instance, at North and Charles, we see that particular area has gotten investment from UB, I guess Eddie Brown, Micah, Johns Hopkins. That's solid investment right at North and Charles, an area that's been transformed in the past 5 years. But 1 mile to the east, 1 mile to the west, I mean, my God, these neighborhoods have seen no investment, even penn-north. I mean, it's right there in the heart of our 40th beloved district. Freddie Gray happened there in 2015. This is 6 years later. And the only thing we've seen here in Sandtown since Freddie Gray is a renovated Western District Police Station. Now, to me, that's just as racially violent as those cats climbing up the wall trying to get into the Capitol.
All right. I would have to disagree with you, Donnie. And I'll tell you why in just a minute. And I'm so sorry, Ms. Jews, if you know the brother's name who coined the phrase or wrote the book, wrote the research around the white L and the black butterfly, please yell it out to give credit to the individual. But
I don't know. That's why I was asking Donnie.
Oh,
I'll get it for you. Go ahead.
Yeah. So there is a professor at Morgan State University here in Baltimore City that coined the phrase the white L and the black butterfly. And it's not unique to Baltimore. If you look at urban cities around the country where, a lot of jobs have been exported overseas and white flight has happened in urban areas, you seem to see the wealth really along like the center part of those cities. And in Baltimore is no different. If you look along the Charles Street corridor and then as you look along like the waterfront or the Gold Coast, whatever you want to call it, that's what I sometimes refer to. Mm-hmm. You see a lot of wealth, a lot of prosperity, a lot of new businesses and development. But if you look in communities like the ones I represent, that Donnie spoke of in Sandtown, Winchester, penn-north, Park Heights, you don't see that same type of prosperity. And so, history has a way of repeating itself over and over. A lot of it is systematic, and that's why it's not by coincidence that the same that could apply here in Baltimore City can apply to cities of Detroit and other cities around our nation that have declined. And so that's the kind of concept around the white L and the black butterfly. I will tell you, some of the issues that led up to Freddie Gray have long persisted in a lot of our communities, right? Mm-hmm. And it's all about, the will and intention of folks that are in the place to make some of these decisions to prioritize. And for a long time, that has not always been the case. And there's other people that's in the room with a louder voice and louder influence that make sure those folks get what they needed. I will tell you, when I served in the House, and God rest his soul, Mike Bush had the opportunity to introduce a package the following session. You remember with Freddie Gray, we were out of session for a week and a half. And then the outbreak happened with the uprising and everything. And so that was my very first session in the House of Delegates. But Mike Bush, at least to his credit as the Speaker of the House, traveled throughout Maryland. I had a chance to spend time with them in Baltimore City to develop a package that provided $50 million over 10 years. And out of that package became things like core money that was able to demolish a lot of the blight in our community and get rid of a lot of the vacant houses. Out of that became the extended hours of the libraries and also the anchor institution bill. One of the things that I'm looking at introducing this year, it provides for hospitals and universities to actually work within the communities that they sit in and have a positive impact on what's going on around them. I've been a little disappointed, and I think I want to make some changes when I reinstituted, because it was a 5-year program, so all of those activities expire this year, right? And so one of the things that I like to do with reintroducing it and reactivating it is put special attention to our HBCUs, our historically Black colleges and universities. If you look at those who have benefited from the Anchor Institution Fund, University of Maryland, Baltimore, Sinai Hospital, St. Agnes Hospital, College Park, you go on and you name it. To my knowledge, not a single HBCU in the state of Maryland has benefited from, at the point where it was created at $5 million every year. Now it's up to $10 million every year. None of those institutions have benefited from that money. And there was a whole list of various things that went place. But prior to Freddie Gray, our communities have been on a decline for a very, very long time. 5 years isn't going to turn the corner, but I think we did make some marginal progress. There was some things done in some of the communities we care about, but we're so far behind in trying to address these things. Our communities continue to suffer and look in distress.
Senator, that's hard to swallow, because while the poverty is not new, the fact that we've dominated politics, I don't understand. What have we been doing? Those Blacks who have been in the legislature, been in the city council, been in city hall, even in the state house, I don't understand how come our political power hasn't translated into the economic development of our community if we're running things. I don't, what am I missing?
No, fair point. And, if you look at the city of Baltimore and their budget, the city really is very cash strapped. So if you look at Baltimore City and how its budget is derived, 30% of the land in Baltimore, 30% of the geography in Baltimore is untaxable, right?
Why?
So we have some of the greatest institutions in the world. We have Johns Hopkins, University of Maryland, Coppin State University, Morgan State University. We have tons of government buildings. We have some of the most influential churches in America and other nonprofits. None of those organizations pay taxes. That is the largest revenue that the city used in order to generate its funds. And so over the years, you've seen the state take on even greater responsibility. If you look at the police department is technically a state agency. We're the only jurisdiction in the entire state of Maryland where the state actually foots the bill for our central booking facility. In every other county government is responsible for that. We're the only county in the entire state of Maryland that the state of Maryland funds the entire budget for our community college. In every other county government takes care of that. If you look at our school system here in Maryland, in Baltimore City, the state of Maryland funds 70% of the school system's budget. The city of Baltimore only funds 30% of that. And so over the years, as Baltimore has lost revenue, lost population, we've lost the influence that we've had on some of these structures, and it's had to defer to the state. And so oftentimes, and that's why the legislature is so important in Baltimore, because Baltimore don't have all of the resources that it have. Oftentimes we have to turn to the state to take care of it. And that raises a lot of animosity among our colleagues around the state. Oftentimes you will hear people in Harford County, Baltimore County, and especially,
like Marianne Lasanti.
Marianne Lasanti. But also, it may be surprising to some of your listeners, but some of the most harsh pushback we get from what you would think would be our comrades in the fight in Prince George's County. There once was a time where Baltimore City had 29 delegates that represented Baltimore City. Now we're down to 16, and the big guy on campus, as far as numbers now, is really Prince George's County. And a lot of those legislators served at a time where you had people like Pete Rollins and Barbara Hoffman, chairs of both the budget committees, used to bogart their way through and get more resources from Baltimore. Now Prince George is
at the same time, those same I'm thinking more of Clarence Mitchell III and those guys who helped Prince George's County when they didn't even before they had Tommy Broadwater, correct?
Right, and part of our work is to remind them of those things, right? But a lot of times when you see,
but we did help them.
Oh, absolutely, we did. We Prince George's County, even to this day, if you look at their representation, it's kind of mixed, right? But it was the legislators in Baltimore City and through the efforts of the Black Caucus and others that really provided opportunities for places like Prince George's County and other majority African American counties to really thrive. But there still exists. And I'll tell you,
hey, Umar, just one point, Umar. Both Baltimore and Prince George's, in terms of public education, we're running neck and neck for the bottom. Shouldn't that dismiss any differences we might have? We're both at the bottom.
Absolutely.
Hello?
It's shameful.
Umar?
So Senator, and just everybody, it's just like we become part of a system. So let me just give you an example and I'll make a point. When you have an abusive family, you've got the abuser, you've got the abused, and sometimes you have a 3-year-old girl or a 4-year-old girl that ends up being, I'm going to be the warrior and protect my mom. Yeah. And we take on these roles and we get stuck throughout our lives with that. And it almost seems like if we wanted to solve the Baltimore issue, we were talking about visions before, if there was really a mandate to do that, there's really smart people to get that done. But this has been an ongoing issue. There's no easy answers. It's almost as if we need to throw all the legacy stuff away and get a blank sheet of paper and say, okay, how do we start getting these neighborhoods that are impoverished to start moving up? How do we do that in a way that we don't get caught up in the excuses of the past? All of them are real. I get that. But if we stay stuck in the old system, nothing's going to change. This show in 2030 is going to be the same conversation. So how do we scrap everything just in a thought experiment and envision a future where we fix these problems?
Right. And some of those choices is very hard and systematic of the system in which we have. A lot of people that are in the position to make these decisions depend on being elected every 4 years. And therein lies some of the problems. If you look at the exercise, and I'll use just as one example, the exercise that we're going through with our school system right now, right? Mm-hmm. We still have the same amount of schools, the same amount of classrooms that we had when Baltimore was a city of 1.6 million. Now we're a population of somewhere hovering around 600,000. But every community want to keep their school, right? And at the end of the day, as an elected official, you want to deliver on behalf of the people that send you to Annapolis. So what do? Do you go along with eliminating the school in a district where you have a lot of constituents? And I think when people make the comparison sometimes of like business and government are two completely different systems, right?
Right.
In business, it's very simple to look at the bottom line. In government, the bottom line is the people. And if the people aren't happy, if the people are demanding more police officers as opposed to more mental health services to deal with the issue that's coming before them ahead of time, at the end of the day, the people are going to win. And so part of what I've been trying to do as a legislature, sometimes it takes a Did I call?
Yeah, something happened.
Oh, someone tried to call me. I apologize.
Oh, that's okay.
But people, we don't realize the value of organized people. Mm-hmm. When people are organized, when people stand up and speak truth to what it is that they want to see in their communities. That's the only way that change. And so one of the things, I started off as a community organizer. And so I'm in a unique position to try to build capacity in communities to make sure that some of the things that I'm proposing have the support of the people that I represent. But the scenario in which you describe is a lot easier said than done when you're looking for people to get elected.
Umar, sorry, Senator, just, what you guys are talking about reminds me of one of my favorite stats, and I only know the numbers at the federal level, so I don't know what it is at the state level. If you look at sort of public polling, Congress in general has an approval rating of somewhere around 20%. Mm-hmm. And yet the re-election rate for members of Congress is well over 90%. Mm-hmm. And I've always been fascinated by how those two numbers can coexist. And the only explanation that I have been able to draw from that is that while people are generally distrustful of government generally, they like their own member.
Yeah.
And I don't know how Umar, to your point about how do you sort of blow it up and take out a blank piece of paper, the way our current system is constituted, I don't know that you can.
And I agree. And I think that's where it comes, there's a difference between leadership and politics. And I could never be a politician, is that it takes somebody brave to come up and say, look, the emperor has no clothes. What do we really want to solve? If this is, instead of solving everything, this is one thing that we want. If we solve the Baltimore issue of those neighborhoods that really need help, think of all the resources we save for the next 100 years if we start getting affluence back in there. So it takes somebody that's going to be a leader to step up, who's willing to say, there's a good chance I won't be reelected, but I need to go up there. But people are scared to do that.
Yeah.
So Umar, I need to say something here,
sure,
because the reality is gentrification is already happening. So they're coming back to take over the city of Baltimore. In the meantime, my piece right here is, why aren't we empowering, educating, and employing the people, the residents of this city?
Yes.
Why aren't we putting the money in to build our communities? Why are we allowing all of these absentee, like Jared, what's his face, to come in and have all these vacant buildings all over this city? We're not tearing them down. We're not building them back up. And then we don't want to put the money in it. So people like you will sit back and say, okay, well, we need to have the money here. We need to have the residents here. We need to build and bring all this here. But that's part of the problem, because what's here needs to be dealt with. And the people need to be empowered. The people need to be educated. The people need to be employed. You need to bring businesses into this community that's going to hire our people and train our people. People don't want to sit down and live in squalor. Nobody wants to go through this foolishness. All right, so then change it internally. If we have to deal with it internally, and moving rich white people back into the city doesn't have anything to do with the people that live here now. And then those people that are living here in the projects and whatever, they're moving all the way out to Howard County. They can't even get to a job because now there are no even buses out there. Don't get me started on that. And that is the disparity that we're dealing with.
So
one second, Umar, but Marsha makes a really, really good point. If you really want to make change in a system that is created now, like really investing in the people in these in neighborhoods and communities, and giving them the resources that they need to challenge the way things are going, that's the way you bring about some of the change.
And let's be clear, you don't mean climbing the walls of the state capitol.
Absolutely not.
Right.
But if you look at and talking about attracting and bringing businesses to Baltimore, one of the largest demographic that's leaving Baltimore City right now, the largest demographic is African American professionals. And so those young people who are graduating from Compton, Morgan, and some of the other places, and then they go on to get their law degrees and other things. We're not building communities that are culturally attractive or, just attractive, period, to keeping those folks here in Baltimore. So yes, we need affordable housing, but we also need mixed communities that afford an opportunity for growth. And also, like I said, I go back to the economic piece, because that's so key. If we gave people an opportunity to have a seat at the table as it relates to economics, that changes the game.
So let me give you an example. So what we need to take a look at is, if we can't figure it out here, we need to take a look at another model somewhere else. Has anybody here been to Singapore?
No.
Have not.
A beautiful city state. Basically, they were run by the British like the rest of the world was at one point. The Japanese were coming in the Second World War. The British said, thanks for the tea, we're out of here, and they abandoned them. They got invaded by the most vicious military tool ever invented. The Japanese came in with bicycles and took over the whole place in like a couple of hours. So they needed speed. So when the Japanese finally left, they were left to their own. The British came back and said, we want to help control you. They said, thanks, but no thanks. We got you. You abandoned us when we needed you. And so they're just a bridge away from Malaysia, which is a massive country. And they decided that let us be annexed by Malaysia. And the Malaysian voters voted not to have Singapore join them. And I had seen this TV show where the leader of the country was literally crying because 2 million people landed on his shoulder. And it was like, how do we make this little city state with no resources other than some mangoes and some coconuts to thrive? And what he decided to do was, we've got Chinese living here, Indians and Malaysians. We need everybody to come together as one people with one mission. And they basically decided, what do we need to do to move from third world to first world, skip second world, and become the dominant place in Asia? So when American companies and Europeans come to Asia, they come to Singapore first. And everybody set aside their own agendas. And it was like, how do I serve my country? What Kennedy did for us. Ask not what your country can do for you. And basically, they brought everybody together with one mission. And I think what we need to do is to get people that are really passionate about this, get some funding from you, Senator, and say, we're going to pick a neighborhood. How do we get business back here that's small business, that employs people, that keeps people here? I'm not sure that's the answer, but we need something like that to have a prototype that we can figure out what works. And from that, let it replicate it. But if it's too big a problem, nothing happens.
Yeah, and before the senator answers that, let me, from my perspective, Umar, I'll say, just listening to you, I think there's what I consider to be a little bit of a flaw in the analogy.
Sure.
And I'm curious to get the senator and Marsha and Donnie's thoughts on this. In the Singapore analogy, everybody's on the same page that Singapore needs to be rebuilt into something that benefits everybody. I'm not sure that everybody in the state of Maryland agrees what should happen with Baltimore.
No.
I think there's disagreement on that point. I think we are all of a like mind, but I don't think you're going to find consensus on that. And I suspect that the senator and his other legislative colleagues in Annapolis have very different opinions about whether or not Baltimore is worth saving.
Well, let me
I used to live in Bethesda before I moved to Baltimore.
Hold tight, Marsha. Okay. Senator, one of the major issues in Baltimore City is vacant houses. In multiple conversations with State Senator Kelly, she was explaining to me how it is that the challenge of taking back these vacant properties. When I moved into this block here on Carrollton Avenue, it was 80–90% occupied. Now I have vacants on both sides of my house. What is the challenge taking these vacant properties owned by absentee landlords and putting them somewhere else, giving them to the city, giving them to Mervo, giving them to Carver, and letting them what is the property? Because I submit to you, that is a core issue here in Baltimore. It's hard to fix a block like mine when you have so many absentee landlords who still have the right to own property. Right. Can you explain?
I'll tell you, one of the biggest challenges to turning some of these houses around is the cost of labor and the cost of material. And so Baltimore, unlike other places in some of the suburbs and other places, is a built environment. A lot of the structures here are solid. Like although they're vacant, it takes
brick house, brick walls.
But one of the things that you propose, and I don't know if you've been doing some research in preparation for this hearing, but last year I introduced this piece of legislation called passive housing legislation, whereas Carver High School will partner with Micah and a baseball coach that's actually volunteering at Carver to renovate some vacant houses in the community, right? And we would provide some funding to help them do that. Unfortunately, the legislation wasn't successful last year. And to my point earlier, the chair of EHE, and to Neil's point earlier, the chair of EHE is a Prince George's County senator, and he believed that putting more money to Baltimore was not the best thing to do. It was in the best interest to get the money from the school system, because they have an organization in Prince George's County that does one house a year, and he believed that's success, right? And so that piece of legislation passed. I am going to introduce it again this year, but it will provide funding for young people in some of our vocational schools to work on vacant houses and get the skills. Now, we've had some successes since the last session. Luckily, we were able to get in contact with the owners of the property. They donated them, so that eliminated some of the costs of acquiring them. And then between Micah and other fundraising efforts, they were able to get some things done. But to Neil's point, everyone's vision for what they'd like to see in Baltimore and their willingness to help the Baltimore isn't the same. And especially in the state legislature, where you have 24 different jurisdictions competing all for the same limited pot of the resources, a lot of time the results that you get in the end are not what's actually needed.
Does Baltimore City contribute more to the Maryland State Lottery than the other 23 jurisdictions?
You referring to the customers? Probably, yes.
So shouldn't we be getting that same percentage back in profit or residuals? Shouldn't those funds be?
You and I may think that, you know, whatever money that we raise should come back here, but you know, you have to get everyone else. And
That's
you know,
right.
and I'll just talk about the Senate. But in the Senate, you have 47 members. Only 5 of them are from Baltimore City.
Right.
You have a long way to go to get those other 20. What is it? God,
Whatever
testing
number.
me on my math.
Mhm.
24 votes in order
Mhm.
to get something passed. And sometimes, like I explained the process earlier, that Marcia had me describe, you first have to get through the committee chairs.
Right.
And oftentimes, Baltimore City, we have the Senate president, but other than that, there's no other member of our delegation out of 5 members that are in leadership of one of those committees. We lost a huge advocate for Baltimore City and Senator Conway, who used to chair the EHE committee. But you know, you have to, and it's about bridge building. I think we talked about that earlier. We have a challenge, and we have to work with other jurisdictions and find common interests. And a lot of times that means diluting the help that will come to Baltimore. If you need $100, but you need to go to Prince George and Montgomery County in order to get the support to get it, your $100 then turned into $30, and you never really address the problem that you had at hand that
That's
you
right.
needed $100.
You know, Senator, I used to live, before I first came to Baltimore, I was living in Bethesda, and I was involved in the Montgomery County community, right? And our legislators and folks were not interested in what needed to go on in Baltimore. They were about Bethesda or whatever, Montgomery County, and they didn't care, okay? And then I moved here, and I lived in Baltimore City, and then I moved to Baltimore County. It's the same thing out there as it is in this city. And so what we have to do as citizens of the city of Baltimore is get far more involved in sending letters and going down to testify and doing whatever it is that we need to do on a Zoom call or whatever to literally let people know what we want to do. But I think the other piece is maybe that all of the senators and folks who are the politicians can do some community forums where we can talk about our priorities, and then have some of our leadership go down and do these conversations. You all need backup.
Yes, absolutely.
Do you know what I'm saying?
And
you need somebody to have your back.
Right. One of the things that we did when we came in, Marcia, and it may be overdue to do that again. Oftentimes, those who are the most loudest critics of Baltimore City, I often invite them down to Baltimore, and I take them to the corner of Pennsylvania and North Avenue, right? And I take them to, you know, Harlem Park and other communities that have seen the devastation. And a lot of times when we speak about it in Annapolis, it's one thing to hear it in a debate, right? But when you actually see the devastation and the levels of poverty that a lot of our communities are going through, we've been able to build some bridges in that way. And so it's definitely a continuous, you know, process. All is not perfect. We've done, you know, with the few people that we do have, we've made some progress. But I just don't want to give people the impression that because I'm Senator Hayes, that I have a magic wand to raise and can bring whatever it is that I want. I'm very happy today after I deport you guys, and this is after 6 years being in the legislature. And Donnie talked about penn-north, which he know is home, right? So just a block away from the corner of Pennsylvania and North Avenue is where I grew up. But as I end this call at 11 o'clock today, I'm getting on a call with some city officials, whereas we've been in a 3-year planning process to try to get some funding to build a new recreation center for the first time in penn-north. And so I'm really, really excited about that. And then this upcoming legislative session, my entire delegation from the 40th district will be paying special attention to the entire stretch of West North Avenue. There's some good stuff going on. We have a significant anchor institution in Coppin State University, but there's
a new president, and you have a new president.
Yes, we have a new president who has a lot of energy and is so committed to going outside of the fortress of the traditional forms of colleges and universities and getting into the community in a meaningful way. And so I'm excited about the possibilities. The problem is a lot of the things that's going on aren't connected. And so
it feels to me like a little bit of a chicken and the egg thing, in that Baltimore needs to somehow be reestablished as the flagship city within the state, which it was for so long.
Great point. Great point. We only got 4 minutes.
Okay, go ahead. 30 seconds. 30 seconds. What I was going to say was that's important, but I suspect a lot of people in Annapolis aren't willing to reinvest in the city until they see that move towards it being reestablished as the flagship. But the problem is you can't get there without the investment, which is why it's a little bit of a chicken and the egg thing.
Yeah.
That investment has to come first. People have to take a leap of faith that Baltimore can get back to where it was. They just need a commitment from people economically in order to be able to get there.
Yeah,
well, maybe it's not positioning it as would get Baltimore back to where it was, but Baltimore for the future. And that there is a whole nother plan moving forward that is relevant to where we are in the year 2021. So 2021, if we were sitting here, we're talking about Black Engineer of the Year Awards Conference coming up. But the reality is that we should be looking at how we can create hubs of STEM training, employment, bringing in businesses that can take these kids off the corner who already have the intuitiveness to deal with technology, bring them in and start putting these programs together where kids can get training and go to work immediately. You don't need a degree in all of these positions that are available. So there are ways that we can do a paradigm shift for our community. And I'm over in Corey's community. And I know
we have to let him go in 2 minutes. We got to let him go.
Well, I said what I had to say, and you can do whatever you want to do, but we need to get people employed.
Absolutely.
Senator, have you been on North Avenue by 83 in between Mount Royal and Park Avenue?
Yes.
They have a bike lane there
that
there are no bikes in, there are no cars in. It's just arrows pointing to the left. The whole North Avenue rising thing, single lane traffic at Coppin State, it's not working. 28th Street Bridge, bike lane, bottleneck traffic, it's not working. And then also, do we like Francho for governor? We have Francho running for governor. Do we like Francho? Do we like Angela Also Brooks? Do we like Johnny Ocheski? Do we like Donnie Glover?
We can't hear you, Senator.
Job as governor.
We can't hear you, Senator. We can't hear you. We cannot hear you.
He heard that.
Donnie, was that an announcement?
I'm just letting you know I'm available for governor.
Yeah.
I'll vote for you. You got one.
Okay, well, that's one. All right, well, the senator had to go. What are your thoughts? Oh, there he goes. There he goes. Hold tight. We're coming at you. Hold tight. Hold tight. Senator.
Yeah, so it's too early to call on the governor's office, but what I'm focusing on right now is West Baltimore. West Baltimore is long overdue for investment. We need mixed communities that provide some, and there's some great things. If you look at Madison Park North, $100 million project, more than close to 200 homeowner occupied homes that are going to be built from the ground over there. You go along North Avenue, Wally Brandon Wally from Wiley Funeral Home, just opened up a brand new flower shop, looking to do more there. You go further down, Pennsylvania North Avenue Art Social Club, along with the Penn-North communities, developing some stuff.
I know, but Franco wants to be governor, and he's from Montgomery County. Does he understand the level of poverty in Baltimore?
We'll find out soon, won't we, Donnie? If not, we'll tell him.
Thank you for joining us, Senator Antonio Hayes, straight from Penn North. We love and respect you. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you all.
Thanks.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, Senator. Okay.
What do you think? What do you think, family? Oh, let me give you Alexis's comments. Alexis Coates says, Senator Hayes, we cannot continue to manage the city with the same budget as 10 years ago when we had 1.6 million citizens. We need a new plan to fix the city, issues. Umar, Neil, Marsha, what do you think?
Well, I'll say this. What Marsha said earlier was right. I'm a little scared to disagree with her today. She's fired up. So I'm just going to agree with everything she says.
Wise man.
No, I mean, you can't solve today's problems with yesterday. You can't solve today's problems with yesterday's solutions, right? I mean, and Marsha's point is a valid one. You have to look not just to the present, but to the future. And that requires a vision of some kind. And you know, it's all well and good asking for additional funding and having opportunities be available. You have to be able to explain. If you're going to your fellow legislators in Annapolis, especially those who may be certainly from other geographical areas and other parties, it's not enough to simply say, hey, we need money for Baltimore. People have to be convinced as to why, right? You want additional appropriation, tell us what it's going to be used for. Tell us what it's going to do, how it's going to benefit the state, and then, you know, by extension, me and my, and politically and otherwise. And that's part of the vision that needs to be communicated. Why is it important to the state for Baltimore to begin be reestablished, and how do we get there?
In a leadership role.
I just wanted to share with you some of the comments from the fan page of what people have been saying over the weekend as to last week's takeover. The last time that such an event happened was when the British stormed the Capitol in 1814. But here's some of the comments. Here's one. Our nation will not settle until the traitors among us and their echo chamber, Fox News, etc., are silenced and brought to justice. Here's another one. Trump supporters don't care if he lies, commits treason, or destroys the USA. They'll support Trump because he hates the same people that they hate. Another piece of news, Rudy Giuliani left a voice message for the wrong senator asking him to object to every state in the electoral college count. And so my question to the panel is, how are you recuperating as Americans? Umar?
So I happen to be a Canadian, but I think the best way to honor
Lucky you.
The best way to honor President Trump is this: is in the past when we talked about the First Amendment, which is a gift to the world, was to say, okay, you can speak whatever you want, any way you want, unless you're in a movie theater and you shout fire when there isn't one. And I think we're going to replace that phrase with you can't incite a riot and walk away from the responsibility. And I think if we could make that his lasting legacy, is to remind everyone, you can't do shit like that. And so here's kind of my thoughts on it before I have to jump off, is that a lot of my friends are Republicans, and a lot of them 100% believe what they're being told.
Right.
And they think you all are nuts. And that human need to be right, the human need to belong to a tribe is so strong. And the only way you can change that, since the dawn of history, has always been, you need one person with a belief that is a leader that says, look, this is what's most important. So right now, there is no strong voice on the other side. At all. And what we need, one, is to say, like, a lot of people around the world maybe don't love America, but everywhere you go, maybe Iran, they love Americans because they know we're generous, great people. Like up into Latin America, a lot of places, sometimes they don't like us as a country, but as people, Americans, we love them. They're like the best. And I think that's what we need to come back to.
That's not been my experience, Umar.
Really? So
No,
it has been mine. Is
no.
well, unless you go to France, in which case they don't like
The
it.
last 4 years, the last 4 years have changed that significantly.
Well, France, as you mentioned, they were very kind to black soldiers during World War I.
And artists,
And artists.
and they still are.
At the same time, France has been robbing Haiti since Napoleon got his ass kicked by Toussaint Louverture. So Europe doesn't get a pass here.
Agreed. But I think what we need is to say, what do we really stand for? And what we stand for is...
What do we stand for?
What I'd like us to stand for?
No, what do we stand for?
I think what we stand for is being selfish. I mean, the entire conversation today was that, what's in it for me? And how do I can talk about good for everyone else, but when it really comes down to it, what's in it for me? And what we need to do is make a case for what's in it for us is more important than what's in it for me. And I don't have the skills to do that or the integrity to do that. We need
or the bandwidth. I mean, you need television stations. When you look at our young people, they are heavily influenced by social media. If we normal, regular working people don't control these mediums, then you got to wonder, you've got to be amazed at the power of these networks. They can put out a commercial and everybody's doing a TikTok dance by 12 noon. I mean, it's the power of the media. And that's why this show is important.
Donnie, I got to tell you, I'm somebody who's naturally an optimistic person, and I'm incredibly pessimistic. I hate to be a Debbie Downer about this. I am incredibly pessimistic about where we go as a country from here, because it's one thing to say that we're divided. We were divided coming out of the Obama presidency, right? That is a cliche. It is true, but we're in a different place today. And the place we're in today is that half the country tried to disenfranchise the other half because they didn't like how they voted, and are believing flat out made up information to purporting to be fact without giving any credence to what actually happened. And I don't know how it is that these two sides are supposed to coexist when they're literally believing completely fabricated stories and trying to get rid of the votes of the other half of the country. Tell me where it is we're supposed to go from that.
So I disagree with you, Neil. I think half the country voted one way, but that doesn't mean they bought everything hook, line, and sinker.
There are roughly 200 members, Republican members of the House of Representatives. 140 of them voted to decertify the results of the last election. That is more than 2/3 of the Republican members of the People's House of Representatives. Tell me how it is I'm supposed to just accept that and move on.
Right.
Not 2 or 3, not just one random person.
Here's how you do it. Here's how you do it. There are true believers, and there are people that are being selfish. If I don't vote for this, I won't be reelected. If I get Trump's ire, I won't be elected. So they went along with it. Collaborators, let's say. But do they truly believe? I'm not sure half the country believes there. If I had my way, it would be really interesting. Do you believe that a lot of Republicans want safety for the kids, a better future for the kids, a country where we all get along? I would say most of them do. And I think a lot of Democrats do. What's needed here, that's always been needed here, is a third party. Why not take the people that are in the middle from both parties, because they have extremists, and form a third party with normal people in the middle? That would be the majority. And then you get reasonableness. And with that stupid comment, which I realize it is, I will thank all of you. I got a boogie. And thank you, Donnie. Marcia, it was a pleasure meeting you, Neil. And
likewise.
Right.
Cheers.
And God bless America.
Marsha, I want to hear your thoughts on this.
Well, I think the reality is that we have so many people who are really supporting Trump. They leave no bones about it. They don't care what you think. They love him. They believe in him, and he can do no wrong. And those people are like lemmings going over a cliff.
It's a cult.
They're totally. And so you saw them in DC at the Capitol. And if you're going to call yourself a patriot, but you destroy the seat of power for this nation, then you are a traitor, and all of them need to be in jail and removed from being in general population. This is
Wait, are we talking about?
outrageous.
Hey, Neil, I got a question for you.
And
Yeah,
I'm
go.
talking about the legislators that they represent
I
because
think I
they're
know.
culpable.
I think I know what Marsha's going to say. Marsha, have you ever spanked the kid?
Yep.
Neil, have you ever spanked the kid?
I have not, but my kids are still young. It's probably going to come at some point. I don't have a problem with it if it's warranted.
America is full of people who didn't spank their kids. Donald Trump should have got his ass whipped 70 years ago.
Yeah.
He wouldn't grow up and be the selfish prick that he is.
But Donnie, the problem isn't Donald Trump. Donald Trump is a problem. Donald Trump is not the problem.
It's
The
70
problem
million.
is the people who enable him.
70 million.
And it's the members of Congress and the people who went along because they got their tax cuts
Right,
and they
well,
got the Supreme Court justices and they
I got
got
you,
at cocktail parties and pat each other on the back about how well they're
I'm
doing.
going somewhere with this, Neil. Back during slavery, I don't know if you know this, but plenty black women put their breasts in little white kids' mouths and fed them and nurtured them. It wasn't that long ago that somebody named Dr. Spock came about. And he was saying, time out, little Johnny, time out, go to your corner. Now see, Bernie Mac would say, you should have whipped their ass. Because when you don't check your child ends up telling you what they're going to do and what they're not going to do. Now, one more thing. They have a thing now where you can call the police on your parent. Call the police on my mother and see where your ass will be.
I tell people all the time when I was a kid, if one of my teachers ever called my parent to say that I had done something wrong, fortunately it didn't happen very often. My parents never even asked for my side of the story. There was no my side of the story, right? If one of my teachers called, that was it. That was the ball game.
We're missing. That's accountability, and it starts at home. But they pass rules. You can't pray in school. You can't pray in school. But now they're bringing guns to school and doing mass shootings.
And don't worry about praying.
Took prayer out to schools. Now you're penitentiary. America has 5% of the world's population, but 25% of the world's image. We failed at home.
Donnie
Right.
and Marsha, answer my question because it's somewhat a rhetorical question, but it's also not. Where do we go from here? Be the optimist to my pessimist. Tell me where it is as a country on January 20th when Joe Biden gets sworn in and we have a Democratic Senate and a Democratic House and Donald Trump is in the rearview mirror, hopefully for good. Where do we go? How do we pick up the pieces?
No, the real question is, Neil, if I were you, I'd say, Marsha, Donnie, how are you controlling yourselves from getting the 50 million black people that you know is actually 40 million from climbing that damn wall just like they did last week? That's the real question.
Bye, y'all.
Well, so much for the revolution.
I'm not qualified to answer that question, but it's a good question.
All right.
That's the real question. Donnie, thank you for not climbing the wall. Thank you for not
Donnie,
turning.
I can tell you what would have happened to you if you did. That didn't happen to the people last week. That I do know.
No
that
question.
I do know.
You better
What
believe
would
that.
happen, Neil?
Oh, that you really want me to answer that question?
What would happen if Black
You
Lives
think
Matter
think if it was a BLM or an Antifa event and somebody's put one foot in the Capitol building that it wouldn't have played out completely differently?
Mm-hmm. They'd all be dead.
Did you see Eugene yet, Marsha?
What?
Eugene.
Mm-mm.
That was the Black Capitol Police.
I did. That was great. He needs to be given the Presidential Medal of Freedom.
No, I haven't seen that.
Eugene Goodman.
What happened?
That's the black man that was running from the crowd with a baton. Eugene.
Right.
He single-handedly bought time for some of the members of Congress
to get out,
to get into a safe place. Because I got to tell you, the one thing I think back on, look, what happened was awful. But you see the videos of these people calling out, "Where's Pelosi? Where's Pence? Where's Schumer?" If they had gotten in quickly, it's amazing, Marsha. You should watch it. But if these people had been able to make it in quicker and got their hands on a member of Congress, we would be having so much different a conversation now.
Mhm.
And
It's
thank God they
unfortunate.
didn't.
It's
Thank God they
unfortunate.
didn't.
It's unfortunate.
I could not be Eugene. I would have pulled that thing off my hip and started lighting it up like the 4th of July. He was swinging with a baton. He wasn't even trying to hit him. Who gave the shutdown? Who gave the stand down order? That's the
Somebody
question.
in a leadership position that had to be their captain or sergeant or somebody.
Yeah,
They
but
didn't
so
do
think
it.
about it. Reminded me a little bit. So he's standing there and he sees all these white people coming at him, and he's standing there. It reminds me. You guys remember the movie Die Hard with a Vengeance with Samuel Jackson and Bruce Willis? And Bruce Willis makes a comment. He's got to wear that sign in Harlem, and Samuel Jackson, he says, "Why didn't you kill me or shoot me or something?" He goes, "One white guy gets killed in Harlem today. 10 more show up tomorrow." Right? People of color. You have to think very, very hard. Even law enforcement members of color have to think very, very hard before pulling their trigger in a way that other law enforcement people do not.
Well, not necessarily
You're
on the
right.
street, because they
You're
do
right.
they shoot black people faster than they shoot anything.
Yeah, but what
Faster
Eugene
than a
is
rabbit.
thinking in that spot, other than self-preservation, part of what's going through his mind, and you'll have to convince me that I'm wrong about this. I don't think I am.
Next
is
week's paycheck.
I'm going to be shooting a bunch of white people. What does that
He's
mean
not
to
going
me?
to do that. That's right. He's not going to do that.
And right, and if it was reversed,
Oh, he was thinking, where am I going to work next?
yeah.
He was thinking of how am I going to get the hell out of here. That's what he was thinking.
But good, you know
Alive,
what? He did
alive.
his job and he saved lives. Presidential
Anyway.
Medal of Freedom for that guy.
That's exactly right. I got to go.
All right, guys. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. Thank you for watching another edition of the Be More News Morning Show. We will be back tomorrow, 10 o'clock and on time. Marsha Jews, Neil Dubovsky, also Umar Hamid, and to Senator Antonio Hayes. Up to date, down tomorrow, do your day and everything will follow. Nothing to it. Almost looked like bobblehead there for a second, Marsha. Neil, we have to tell you who bobblehead is. You don't know who bobblehead is?
He already knows.
I know what a bobblehead is.
Up to date, down tomorrow, do your day and everything will follow. Nothing to it but to do it, or got to do it, regardless of how I feel. I am somebody. I am my brother's keeper. Good morning, Baltimore.
Good
Guys,
morning,
take care. You're the
Baltimore.
best.